Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 202, Palindrome episode, which, you need to always bookmark these and keep them for posterity. They're like collector's items. But it's the GX show, July 22nd. For those of you new to the podcast, we kind of we alternate each week. 1 week we have the GX show, which stands for Gamer Experience Show, where we talk about what we've been playing. And then on opposite weeks, we talk about news. Tonight, we actually have a very, very deep agenda of games and a lot of new games, which isn't always the case for us. So that's exciting. But first, last week, like right as we were running up to the show they announced like the Steam Deck. And so before we really get into the games, we kind of want to touch base on that a little bit more as we'd able to absorb more information. And I just realized I went through. I'm SwissGuard. I got DBQ Hams with me. How you doing, DB?
I'm good, but let's keep going. So
yeah, and Game Logic. He's the one that really wanted to touch base on the Steam Deck once more. So I'm just gonna throw it to him and let him kind of pick at it a little bit.
Yeah, be patient with us. It is that kind of night, and it's been that kind of week. But we're here to talk about games. But let's get some housekeeping out of the way. So, as SwissGuard mentioned, a lot of cases, a lot of times hardware announcements come out, and we choose not to cover them when they come out like the night of or the day before we do our broadcast, because we usually like things like this to percolate a little bit, because there tends to be a lot of misinformation and yada, yada, yada. So most of what we're going to go over tonight, I uncovered by finally tracking down articles on Windows Central, PC Gamer, and Tech Radar. So great articles on the Steam Deck, technical articles comparing sussing out the type of performance that people should expect, etc. So I just want to cover these. We just want to cover these things really quickly to kind of clean up some of the misconceptions that we had because of the information that was out, or the lack of information that was out. First off, as you could expect, the first thing I'm going to do is proclaim that we were correct last week, and it is still accurate that you cannot run Windows on the device as it exists out of the box. You don't sideload Windows like an app, and you don't run it alongside SteamOS. Again, so that part of what we stated last week was correct. So if you want to run Windows, you do have to wipe SteamOS off of the device and install, theoretically, a licensed version of Windows. What has come out, though, since then is that Valve itself has come out with a statement that says that they do not recommend that you do that. Their preference would be that you simply run or utilize Proton, which is a interpretation layer that is embedded in and integrated in the operating system. And I term it an interpretation layer rather than an abstraction layer, because it is not an emulator. So it is not quite necessarily this kind of viscous membrane in between a virtualized version of Windows and the Linux operating system. It is an interpretation layer, so the things run natively, for lack of a better term, inside the operating system, and as they fire outputs which normally the Linux operating system could not understand, this thing, which is running alongside or inside Wine is not an emulator. Haha, that joke's been around for a very long time. Interprets those signals and converts them to something that Linux can understand. So there's Proton. It's in SteamOS 3. Whatever version they're on. It is the 3.x version of SteamOS that this thing is going to run. And that's been in SteamOS for quite some time. So that's Proton. The way Proton works, or like the business model, your operational model, if you will, there are games on the Steam store that are whitelisted, that Valve has gone through, and through whatever program they have, I would assume it involves testing. They have verified, for lack of a better term, that there are games that are Windows versions of games that run fine in Proton. I don't know if they run with a little less performance or whatever, but let's just say for the sake of the argument that you'll be fine running them. And so some of the things that we said last week where we talked about, Halo the Master Chief Collection, and some other things that there are only Windows versions of, provided that they meet all the other caveats, they should run fine in Proton. Games that are not on the whitelist will still probably run fine with a few small exceptions, and this is very similar to my experience. I have a Windows mixed reality device by Acer. There is essentially a wrapper that runs with that device that allows it to interact with games that are made for Oculus Rift and Valve. And so Valve has gone through the Steam VR games and indicated which ones directly support WMR or Windows Mixed Reality. But when there is a game that doesn't have that symbol, that icon next to it, it still runs okay 99% of the time. There are a few instances where it doesn't. I think that's going to be the type of experience you're going to have if you choose to run this device and play games that are made for Windows and where there's not a Linux version. Now, here are the big things that people are going to stub their foot on. If a game has anti-cheat is a very invasive stub of code, module of code, that basically checks the vast majority of inputs and outputs coming out of the game code, and acts to theoretically trigger something that intercepts those things and prevents the game from running. Destiny 2 has strong anti-cheat in it. Call of Duty has strong I should say that. Call of Duty has some anti-cheat in it to a certain extent. Lots of games have a very specific anti-cheat. It's not a very effective anti-cheat, by the way. Lots of games have very strong, very invasive anti-cheat, and so that, let's just say that it messes up that interpretation layer, and those games don't run. And so again, if you're planning on buying this device and using it for certain things, you should read extensively and make sure that they actually support the certain things that are heartfelt and near and dear to your heart and that you want to run. So the other thing is there's been much ado about game launchers, right? I go back to this comment that, Valve has claimed that it will run everything a PC runs, right? The way you will get, say, and I don't know, I wouldn't go as far as to assume that Game Pass is going to run or that Xbox launcher, but let's just say things like the Epic Store or the Ubisoft launcher or the Rockstar launcher. People, not companies, people have done things to make them run, right? So think of like the XDA forums or other kind of grassroots user forums that have cropped up and enabled and built tools to make things work. World of Warships has, a few people who make, mod packs and put them out. And so people have strung together components and modules that will allow certain game launchers to run on Linux, the Epic Game Store, etc. Now, so you've got SteamOS, you've got the official thing that Valve supports. You've got then these homebrew things that people have put together that will allow you to run the launcher. Then you have the fact that, for instance, Epic has never made any claims that its games will support being run in this Wine Proton environment on top of Linux. So you get, steps and steps away from the home base flag, out into a territory where, you hope things are going to run, but you don't know until other people do them. And so all of this is around, and then I'll go back to the Windows thing again. So you can't run Windows, right, unless you go through this more destructive process. Again, if you do that, right, I go back to what Valve has said and what they haven't said. You're going to be, once you get Windows on that device, you're going to be in driver la-la land. You don't know that there are going to be drivers to support all the hardware components, and you don't know that there are going to be drivers to support that version of the GPU. All of this is to say, I think a lot of people have thought that I have been negative about the device or that I've been saying people shouldn't buy this device. I think most of the dialogue is around, I think that there are hardcore gamers who way overestimate the technical capability of non-technicals who are also PC gamers. I think they have a misunderstanding of the market. There are tons of streamers that I personally know who are PC gamers because that's what they stream. They have not built their own PC. Other people have built them for them. They need help when it comes time to picking parts. Yes, they go and watch a YouTube video and figure out how to put it together, but if that thing comes up and running, like when it comes up and running, that's their extent of knowledge about it. And so when it comes time to troubleshooting, they need help. They don't take, Great Scott, they don't take image snapshots of the PC. So if the PC goes down, their stream is down hard. If they're monetizing that income rate. So my point is there are tons of people out there who are PC gaming who are not PC gamers. Just like when I used to ride motorcycles, there are tons of people out there riding motorcycles, right, who are not motorcyclists, right? There's a difference, and people don't understand that. I also think then that people are I think that people are underestimating the people who might buy this and how they might be influenced by the people who are cheerleading the device. And I think people are underestimating the technical complexity involved with maintaining this thing if you go off the beaten path. I think so many people are out there saying, if you need a dual boot, you just go watch a YouTube video and it's 30 minutes and it'll just work. Like, if you're a technologist, if you're the technorati and you've done these things, then you know that the reason you're a technorati is because you've done things that don't work and you had to figure it out. And not everybody that's being swayed and influenced to buy this thing has that technical basis and has that technical skill set. Some of them will learn it. Some of them will be encouraged. Some of them who are coming from console-only land just want a thing to work. And so what I've been engaged in is just trying to tamp down the level of volume about that there is out there that says, hey, just buy this device. It's a portable thing. You'll be able to run Game Pass on it. You'll be fine. It'll all work out. And then, not concurrently explaining to people, yeah, it all works out. Sometimes it works out because you pull an all-nighter or you're up till 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning tinkering, right, to make the thing work and restore it to factory defaults and then start over again. And again, people coming from console-only land, lots of them just want their stuff to work. All right, so we covered that in the first 15 minutes of the show, which was one of my objectives.
I mean, that's pretty awesome. Glad we had this little incursion of the deep dive into the GX show. But I'm, going to put my foot down and say, the next time we talk about Steam Deck on the GX show, one of you guys better have a Steam Deck.
I've got mine pre-ordered, so.
Oh, really?
I put $5 down, so.
Oh. Pre-ordered.
Taking a bullet,
Yeah, right.
Taking a bullet for the team. It's very much appreciated.
Indeed. All right. So I would have liked to segue from Steam Deck to our games, but we actually don't have a lot of PC games on the agenda tonight, if any at all. Really, we probably won't get to the couple that we have down at the bottom of the list. So, as we always do, we start out with we actually have new releases this week, so I got to wait on the Pix Plays. So first segment, games that have released in the last couple of weeks, and this doesn't happen very often, but all of us have been playing new releases. So when I saw that in the agenda, I was pretty excited, and then I saw what Game Logic picked to play, and on the one hand, I'm excited, but on the other hand, it's like this is like a Game Logic, staple here. So, what'd you pick up and why?
My new release that I've been playing was F1 2021 on Xbox. This is, of course, a game by Codemasters, who I think are out of Liverpool. I may not have that exactly correct, but it is their first game technically published under ownership by Electronic Arts. So EA is the publisher on this game. There's a ton of changes in this year, and Codemasters has been slowly ramping up in this direction anyway, even without EA's purchase. But man, and it probably has nothing to do with their direct ownership, but man, it kind of sort of feels like an EA game in a lot of ways. I don't really know, because a lot of times when developers put these things in my windshield, I don't bother figuring them out if I don't need to right away. But man, it sure looks, smells, and feels like it's a season pass-ish kind of thing. Like every 5 minutes or every iteration of a completion, there's an unlock and a thing going off about something I have new access to, and there's a progression tree at the bottom that goes left to right out into infinity, of new helmets and new suits and new livery and all that kind of stuff you can unlock. I would like to say that those things are of no value and they don't matter to me. But one of the things that they've implemented the last couple of years, which I'm actually using now and have used once before, is the create your own team mode. And so Formula One is a sport where it is the norm that every season there's some number of teams that don't come back and some new number of teams. And in a lot of ways, this implementation for F1 feels more organic and natural than it does in Madden or NBA 2K, where you have options to, roll your own league, right? It always felt fake-ish to me, but in Formula One it feels very natural because that attrition of teams out of the sport really happens. And so it's a little hokey in that the way they've set it up is that when you create your own team, you are both the owner and the lead driver, and they actually have a whole menagerie of role-playing, like cutscenes and stuff around that notion. People actually show up to interview you. There's a famous broadcaster who's in the game who they utilize for part of that interface. But other than that, it has some very neat elements in it in building your own team. And I mentioned that I'd like to say that the season pass-ish kind of stuff I would really like to ignore and say it doesn't matter. But one of the things I did when I built my own team is I took one of those liveries and that's what I assigned to my car. So I have a very unique, very distinctive looking car, which, again, another thing that Codemasters has done really well with this is a lot of times when you have those unlocks and those season pass kind of things, it only applies when you're playing multiplayer. But in this case, it applies when you're in single player. So the livery that I picked, I'm not forced and imprisoned. We're going to talk about another game where they finally made it legal for you to sport your own look in a lot of ways after kind of imprisoning that for some reason behind a gate. But but I have this unique look, and that's the look of my team on track, in the paddock, when I'm on interviews, etc. They have conversation dialogue trees that are very Mass Effect-ish like, and the interviewer who kind of comes through Parc Ferme or like right beside the track asks you a series of questions before and after each race, frequently during other events, and you get 3 or 4 options to choose from. Some of those options get locked when you don't perform well in the race, so I thought that was very interesting. And then your team's morale actually responds to the choices that you make, and so your relationship with the team actually changes, right, depending on how you respond in interviews. One of the things is that, and so this game has a ton of, it's gone from being a purely on-track kind of event to this thing where, DBQ, you and I have talked a lot about how I love the off-season in Madden, and that's like really, to me, where a big meaty part of the game, and I kind of just play the 16 games so I can get from off-season to off-season and manage. This is a game that, like, in an hour of play, I might spend 20 to 30 minutes on the track and then spend an equivalent amount of time at HQ just managing the team. You get called into team meetings, like your aerodynamics team will say, hey, we need to talk to you about something. And you will be presented choices to make, sometimes on whether or not to terminate an employee because of something they said on social media, sometimes to, promote someone, sometimes, unfortunately, it's kind of a little like my work on a given day when I go in and somebody says I need to talk to you about an employee thing. And so it's really interesting. During the times in between races, you get a number of like activity points. And so in this way, it is very much like Fire Emblem Three Houses. And so you have a calendar, you have a number of calendar days in between race weekend to race weekend. You're given a varying set of events, each of which has a time cost associated with it. And you can hit an X button and the computer will just decide for you, or you could go through there and pick, which things are you going to optimize. You get sponsors, you get a budget, you get paid, you're able to decide how to invest that payment, improve your facilities, build a better wind tunnel. All this translates to how you perform on track. You have an R&D track. Different parts become available. You can decide whether or not to conduct R&D in parallel, and so you have multiple teams. Sometimes your teams will fail their R&D because you haven't upgraded their facility. Like, it's incredibly complex. It's enjoyable because, for me, because I've been playing for years, these are things I'm familiar with. I've watched the F1 sport. I get it. It might be a little daunting for somebody coming new into it. But again, you can lean on that crutch of just letting the computer decide a lot of that stuff. It doesn't have and I think they've kind of skewed away from anything that is like a, pimp my crib type of mode that is overly founded on kind of the materialistic things in Formula One, because I hate to say it, but Formula One is the most expensive sport on the planet. Everybody is rich. It might be an overgeneralization that somebody might take offense to, but everybody's rich, so there is no bling. Nobody really cares. Everybody's got money. So there isn't as much an emphasis on that. It's all about like the team and the cars and the drivers and what you're doing from that perspective. There are what's the term I'm looking for? There were exhibition events, so I won the first race. I got invited to an exhibition event, and that gave me an opportunity to drive something vastly different than what I drove every weekend in Formula One, and gave me a chance to exercise my rivalries off track in a different venue. So it's been pretty impressive. From a technical perspective, I'm playing this on the Xbox Series S. I feel like, again, like I'm kind of like I've definitely without question seen in Call of Duty. I feel like I'm seeing the seams where I'm like, I think I just won an X. This is the first year, and I was playing F1 2019 on PC kind of right before this. This is the first year, for the last few years I have bought it on Xbox instead of buying it on PC. I've been very impressed by the way the Xbox version performs and looks. This is the first year where I feel like there's a marked difference I feel like I can see on the Series S version. That is a noticeable step down for me from what I see on PC.
So this was a very interesting dialogue about this, because I was like, I mean, I'm not familiar with the F1 series, so I was just expecting game logic, whatever new racer happens to be on the market, and talking mechanics, and then like you're completely like, kind of just want to get through the races so that I can manage my team and be an office manager and fire people. So it's, I kept waiting for you to pivot to how the racing felt, and I didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah, and that's because I don't know that it's really that different. It actually the practice rounds feel a little watered down. They've backed off of you used to have 5 different programs that you could run during the practice rounds. Now there's only 3. I've talked in the past about how in the earlier years in like the 2010s and just after, those practice programs were brutal, and like I rarely ever succeeded in them, and so there were a chunk of years that I never bothered playing them. I feel like they're a lot more approachable now, and it's interesting that you make choices that have impact. So I won the first round at Bahrain. The second round was at Catalunya in Spain. It has a very long straightaway. I picked a car setup that emphasized my top speed. I did well in the practice rounds. I did the acclimatization program, and I did the race strategy program. Actually, the tire program is one that has always flummoxed me, and I never do well at. I'm doing better this season with the way they have it set up. But I noticed in the acclimatization program, which is one where you run the track, and there's a series of kind of virtual gates that you can see, and there's a speed, and you have to make contact with the gate, but you also have to be above a certain speed threshold for the gate to be successful. And so I ran that. I did well on it. There were a few gates I missed, but I went with this high-speed setup, even though I could tell that it was causing me some problems where I wasn't able to negotiate some corners as well. That worked great in practice. in qualifying, I spun out, and Lewis Hamilton, if you guys don't know, is one of the championship Formula One drivers now. I had an accident with him. I lost 5 places on the grid. I started in the back of the grid. Here I am, like, leading the championship, the driver championship, and coming off the race win. I'm new team, yada yada yada, and then that race was thoroughly horrible. And it was my last race of the night, so there were certain things I did, like I typically never use flashbacks. There were some points in this race that I just had to kind of take my lumps because I had to get done and get some sleep. But that played out in a real world impact. Again, my interviews went different. The options I was given to respond were different. My interface with my team was different. One of the aerodynamic parts that were in R&D so it's really like the on-track experience isn't vastly different than it has been. Definitely and I played, unfortunately, I've played all of these F1 2020, F1 2019, not vastly different. But the impact of those things is definitely, I feel like, much more solid. If I could talk just a few more seconds, there are a couple of game modes, and I should mention, this is what I've played. There are a few other modes that I haven't even touched yet. There is a character-driven campaign with RPG elements in it, with voice acting and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember what it's called, but it is past. What's that?
It's called Breaking Point.
Yes.
But then they used like a car brake spelling to be cool like that.
Yes. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. But I get the sense, and I haven't experienced it yet, but in past years that's been like a limited kind of 3 race-ish kind of experience. I definitely feel like it's far more flexible. It takes center place on your screen when you initially start the game up, so I think there's a lot more meat there. And then there's one other, I think there's an icons game mode where you're playing some famous race. You go through a series of like famous race situations playing some icons. So a lot more content than has been there in the past few years. So it's pretty impressive. I wasn't really happy about the whole releasing the deluxe edition 3 days before the regular edition and that kind of stuff. And like I said, the season pass stuff is in there, but unfortunately, with the departure of, I can't remember I think the head of the company and maybe the chief financial officer also just left Codemasters after the EA transition. So I don't know if that was part of the deal, or if they got really angry about the way this game was being published and marketed and walked away. But it may unfortunately be the last game that we see from Codemasters, and it's definitely reached, at least from a content perspective, it's definitely reached a pinnacle.
So the Codemasters announcement of the purchase was last fall, I believe, right? So
yeah,
some of this would have already been in development. These are not necessarily what, I'm sure EA had some assistance in shaping some of this. First off, I'm loving it. As somebody who really enjoys kind of the story career mode of a sports game, you're selling me on an F1 game. That is high praise, and especially from someone who doesn't really know F1 very well. Like the aspect of the number of points or time that you have in between weeks to invest in things. NBA 2K, the My GM mode, has done that for the last 2 years as well. So it kind of fits into that same aspect. My question, and you're kind of answering it, like if the race aspects of how you perform impact things, which sounds like they do. So do you feel like there's enough of what happens if you fail out some of those challenges and you don't earn enough experience points to develop your tires, or are you kind of pigeonholed then further down the leaderboards, or are there other ways to kind of make up that in order to advance?
It's hard to tell. I think that will scale with difficulty. And in the last couple of years, I've made this, I would contend, more mature choice and selection of how I want to approach the game. I used to buy this game, immediately rip off all the assists and crank up the difficulty level, and then spend weeks and weeks frustrated because I couldn't play it. So I'm going into that a little more gradually this time, and like gradually tweaking in the difficulty. So I think if you keep it at a low enough difficulty, you can just kind of naturally work your way out of that. I think as you approach, medium difficulty, you just wind up at the back of the grid because that would be the reality of what would happen. You have ways to work around that. You don't have to create your own team. You can immediately jump on and just decide you're going to race for McLaren, right, or Williams, or or whatever, or Mercedes, and immediately Ferrari, and immediately get a competitive car and not have to deal with that. You could definitely, I think it's a 10-year career that they allow you to have. So you could, play one where you advantage yourself, and then you could try a round where you create your own team. So there are a couple different ways to come at it that I think you could use to get out of that. You can also change that difficulty, right? So if you poorly flub a race, right, you can run the next race with the assist turned back on, and and less punitive, less punishing aspects of the game to help you get through.
And Swiss, you missed the easy segue here of this was what EA Play Live led off their show with today was
F1.
F1. Yep.
Oh wow.
Not anything new, just kind of hyping, the Codemasters acquisition and Codemasters being part of EA's family. And before they did the announcement for Grid Legends, you got kind of a sizzle reel of F1. And it included a lot of these kind of story modes that Game Logic's talking about.
Yeah,
well, I promised our listeners that we wouldn't have any more deep dive talk on this DX. So wait till next week.
If you are getting interested in it, DB, I would say keep your fingers crossed, and hopefully this thing will show up on Game Pass just like the other F1 variants have, and that'll give you a chance to dip your toe in and not come out your pockets for $70 or $80 to take it for a spin.
All right. I think we'll have more racing talk later in the show, and I think it'll be an interesting contrast when we get down to the end there. But DB, you picked up the latest remake from
Nintendo? Going from a brand new F1 high performing game to a 10-year-old remake of Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Yes, I did pick it up. I've played a little bit. I've gotten through the 2-hour-long tutorial area. I've stayed awake more in this one than I did the last 2 attempts with Skyward Sword and all of its hand-holding. So congratulations to me on that, and maybe congratulations to Nintendo for having Fee not... Actually, Fee's not even there yet, but I'm just not having to deal with the Ruby discussion every time, and it's moving along. I think in some ways, even just the loading times, moving from indoors to outdoors, was a delay in the Switch. I mean, in the original Wii version. So, but I'm playing on controller. I'm not playing with motion controls. Controller works just great. If you've been reading anything or listening to anything about this, the sword is mapped to the right analog stick. So you angle the way you want to slash the sword. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and still some of like the spin moves or finishing moves are a little finicky, or at least they're taking some time to get down. But it works really well. And after listening to people talk about kind of the lack of camera control or the need to hold down the L button in order to have free camera and swing the stick around, Zelda's not a fast-paced game for the most part. And even when it is, you're in combat and you still have your Z targeting. And so I haven't had any issues of kind of slowing the pace a little bit, spinning the camera around. Not really a problem. And it looks good. It looks real nice. I mean, it's art style by the nature of it, cleans up pretty well and still is stylized. So surprisingly, I'm enjoying it. I think the hardest part of a Zelda for me is sticking with it. Like, I can appreciate what it does. It usually takes so long to do what it does that I fall off somewhere along the way. So we'll see how that goes. But really, actually, I haven't played nearly as much as I wanted because I've spent most of this week squeezing in 10-minute battles on Pokemon Unite. So that's my other game that I've been playing this week, or at least the new game this week, Pokemon Unite. This is the MOBA that was announced last year, came out this week on Switch, and it's coming out on mobile this fall. On Switch, it works really well, runs smooth. It actually has a frame rate counter.
Yeah, I noticed
In
that.
in
I
handheld,
picked
I'm
it up.
running around like
Yep,
29, 30 frames per second.
that's where I was at as well.
Yep. But for a MOBA, it is very approachable. You still have kind of the archetypes of a assassin or kind of a melee attacker, a support, a defender, kind of an all around, and the different Pokemon all play into that. Because it's a free to play game, there's plenty of ways to and multiple different currencies. I think actually only maybe two, maybe three
3.
currencies
Yeah.
to get in order to unlock two that can unlock your different Pokemon, and one is paid, one is earned. And after playing probably 4 or 5 matches, I've earned enough to add another Pokemon to my type. And the login every day kind of bonuses gives you a couple. So by the end of the 14-day intro period, it looks like you should have a good selection of different types, and they're still doing the rotating of some free ones as well, but the free ones don't give you kind of a badge points or whatever, an XP bonus because you don't own them. But it simplifies MOBAs a little bit, and Swiss, I think you've been playing it as well. There's still lanes, there's still creeps. It's only 2 lanes, and instead of having kind of towers to destroy, as you're killing creeps or other players, you're getting Pokeballs that then get kind of submitted, dunked into each of the different kind of the equivalent of what would be towers in a regular MOBA, and that adds points. And it also, if you dunk enough of them, if you add enough of the points to a tower, it destroys the tower, destroys the goal. So, and the way that it scores is, rather than having in a normal MOBA where you have to destroy the towers and then get to the base and destroy the base, it has a 10-minute time period. And so it counts up the number of scores total over the course of the 10 minutes. And so you don't necessarily need to push to try to defeat the final tower. I've done it one match when we were kind of wiping a group out, but you can still win or lose by still having your base still defended, but having them just score plenty of points. So I enjoy a MOBA, and I enjoy this stage in a MOBA's life where it's relatively young and I'm not getting outclassed constantly. I enjoyed my time with Heroes of the Storm in the beta periods and in the preview periods. I got into Arena of Valor on the Switch during its preview time, beta time. There was even a Paladins MOBA on mobile that was a 5v5 that I played through a couple patches until they microtransaction the heck out of it. So yes, this is something that I know that I'll be able to put more time into, and I'm curious when it starts to have such a high skill ceiling that it is no longer fun, or how it does matchmaking so that it keeps people engaged long enough that it keeps that going.
Well, I know I saw somewhere on the menu that there was a ranked battle. So, maybe that's going to be how they kind of direct people and make sure that, you have a challenge, but not a frustration. I was surprised that how much I enjoyed it when I was playing it. Like, I was kind of expecting to be underwhelmed, but I figured I'd take it for a spin a little bit just to see. But, it was good. I wasn't sure. I haven't been generating the little, they look like little gems or crystal things, and those were the ones that like you need real currency to get. And I noticed that when I went to look at how much it costs for the Pokemon, all of them require some of those little gems. So I don't know, maybe you're able to get them by leveling up or something, but I didn't notice that.
I thought it was one or the other, right? You could get them with tickets and they were like 6 to 10,000, or you could buy them with gems, which was 500 or 700 type of thing. So I don't,
Okay.
unless it's both. I don't think it's both though. But again, I haven't actually, 5 matches in, I haven't spent enough time to really know what that microtransaction economy looks like.
Yeah, my first uh impression was that you might have to spend a little money to get some of the Pokemon unless you're diligent about participating in events when it's like, oh, if you do it now, we'll give you whatever. They call them like a Unite license or something. That's how you get a Pokemon. But like you said, like in the matches, they don't let anyone double up on a Pokemon. So there's always opportunities to maybe play Pokemon that you don't have in your stable of you know to experiment with, and so that's nice. But yeah, I had fun with it. I feel like if there's some even minimal level of strategic coordination, you were wiping the floor with some of the other people, because I easily won the few matches that I played, and all it was me just kind of following at least a couple of other players around. And
Well, and that's a good mobile strategy, is not
yeah,
to go off and lone wolf, because you're going to get grouped up on, you're going to get gamed up on, you're not going to be able to escape an attack. But if you're in that group, you're going to be able to isolate people. Some of the ultimate moves pull people away or push you and a person outside of a scrum and allow you to kind of isolate them and take them out a little bit more. But yeah, I think in some ways there's not much of a, and there are advanced tutorials which do go into some of this, but it throws you in basically without a whole lot of strategy.
no.
So if you're a MOBA newbie and you don't necessarily have, that sense of understanding of what you should be doing, there are some call outs. I've seen people, as the game is loading in, announce like they're going top or bottom, and that allows a little bit of coordination without a full-on kind of team chat. But it'll be interesting to see how much coordination continues to exist. And like a lot of free-to-play team games, like Game Logic, when we played the Knockout City game with Tao, being coordinated can make a big difference in terms of being able to group up on people. I'm curious to see what this looks like, how it holds up for the next couple of months when it's Switch only, and then it'll get a whole new player base influx when it comes out on mobile as well.
All right, we have one more new Switch game. I picked up Pro Yakyuu Spirits 2021, which is not an American game. This is the baseball simulation from Konami. There has only been one, I think, released in the United States, and that in the West was like the 3DS version
Is this
way
the
back
Power
when.
Pros that was on Wii and 3DS? So it's little like chibi guys?
No, this is their full on like Japanese league simulation.
Okay, so it's not even the anime one like Azuna 11 or anything like that. Okay.
No.
So,
It's
How
you,
did you decide on this?
I was like looking at MLB The Show and I wanted to do something different. And I was like, I wonder if there's like a Japanese league. And so I researched it and I found Pro Yakyuu Spirits, and then I saw, well, hot dog, they're about to release a new version on the Switch in nigh 2 days. So I just, bought it the day it came out.
so
And
when you say this is not an American game, is this not an NTSC game? Like, is this an import?
yeah, I import like with the Switch you can sign up for a Japanese eShop account. So you just basically change the country to Japan, and they give it to you. So you have access to the Japanese eShop. You have to attach that account to a profile on your Switch. So I use one of my younger kids' profiles that doesn't have an online account
Yeah,
already.
this is why I have a Brazilian account as well for some sales. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It's not hard
So
to do.
no. And so the only problem is now like your news feed has like multiple languages in it. But so I did that. The only problem is like you can't use American eShop money for Japanese eShop, and I guess it'd be the same for Brazil or something, perhaps. But there's places online where you can like just basically pay and get like foreign eShop codes.
You can
put
do
it in.
PayPal too, can't you? Oh,
At
you
least not
can't.
with the Japanese
Okay, with
eShop.
the
They have
Brazilian one, I could. So
okay, so that's more convenient. They have some region lock, and I think that might be like a Japan versus that might be a Japanese thing, not necessarily a Nintendo thing.
so everything's in Japanese. How's
It
your
is 100%
Japanese?
Japanese. My Japanese is like enough to get.
To know if you're pitching a curveball or a fastball?
Oh yeah, that's easy because with Japanese, like their import words use a different character set, so it's just like Americanized words, but you just sound it out like you have a thick accent, basically. So I mean, it's mapping American words to their phonemes or whatever you want to call it. So cutter is like kata, and I can read kata, and I know it's a cutter. But so that part's okay. It's like all like the deep with a lot of kanji that I don't know is when it's a little bit of a struggle. But for the most part, I got in and I can recognize like some of the difficulty levels, like, and they have like an indicator if you swing early, it's like hayai, and I know that word means early or fast or something, so swing early. So I know enough to like make it where I'm not having to Google every 10 seconds. But if you want me to be able to talk about like their deep franchise modes, like I'm kind of avoiding those right now because I'm not that like I just got like kind of college level Japanese and not really can stay over there and survive level Japanese. But um but it's been fun. Like the one nice thing is like it's on the Switch and I could have 4 people playing simultaneously. Um and I actually really like the pitching and the hitting mechanics. So
So why did you go for this over something like Super Mega Baseball 3 on the Switch? Just something new. I mean,
yeah,
I love the idea of it. I'm looking at
I
a
was just
line
like
and it looks
I wanted to
because the
play like
graphics are kind of realistic.
yeah, I mean it's their simulation. Like they're so it was more like I wanted to like when I searched for it, I was like, is there like a Japanese league game that I can pick up? And there is, but you have to do the import, but it's not I mean it's not that big a deal, but um there's a site for like the PlayStation versions where like they'll translate all the menus and stuff so you can kind of have that open. And I looked at that just to get a sense of like what the mechanics are because it feels very I think it's basically a port of Pro Yakyuu Spirits 2019 into the Switch with a few more Switch features and updated rosters and whatever. But Konami, it's cool. They don't typically have them released every year. They do it every couple of years, and then you get all the updates for the rosters through that whole time. So it's a little bit more bang for your buck there. Um, and yeah, it's just it's a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it, and I picked it's I picked a team like from a region of Japan that I liked, and kind of been sticking with them. But yeah, so I think I'll talk a little bit more about the game in the next segment, which is the Pix Plays. So that's our assignment segment where we kind of have a theme or a topic or whatever. We play a game based off of that. We try to. So our last Pix Plays was with the announcement of the Switch OLED. Provides a larger screen, but as many of us know, doesn't provide any changes to the processor or upscaling or anything like that. With a dock, all of us own a Switch, and some of us played it more frequently than others. Game Logic, I noticed that you did not complete this Pix Plays assignment for this fortnight. Just throwing that out there. What game in your collection could have really benefited from a more powerful Switch? So the one that was rumored. Play a little and let's talk about the missed opportunities of this announcement, or take a defender approach and play something that helps justify why Nintendo did not need to produce hardware upgrade. So I put Pro Yakyuu Spirits in on this item too, and simply because it looks nice. Like I really enjoy the the animations. I mean, it feels good turning a double play. I have no idea who any of the players are. Like I know that they're actual Japanese big leaguers, but like I have no context, so it's not like I can see Mike Trout or whoever here and put in the game. So I don't know, but I can tell that they did take time to give everybody their individual quirks. So there are some little things that a pitcher will do with their wrist or their hand after they throw it that I can tell is like a signature move or something, or just the batting stances and how they approach the plate and everything. So all that's great, but you can definitely tell there are places where they put more emphasis on like their graphics, and there are places where they put less. After the game, you get interviewed by like the reporters, and I swear that's like PS2 or PS3 era reporter graphics. Like they're just like super low polygon models. And the stadium, like the fans in the stadium, it's like really roughed out. But so all of that could have used a little bit more polish, and I think that's just because of the engine. It's just not powerful enough on the Switch. But the gameplay feels good. I only played it in docked mode, but I didn't experience any slowdowns or anything like that. So
I thought I was going to go with Xenoblade Chronicles, the remaster, just given the large open worlds and some of the frame rate issues there. But I got Monster Hunter Stories 2 through Gamefly, so I played that for a little while. I played the first one on 3DS. It's also out on mobile as well, and it works really well as a mobile game. Actually, it's coming to Apple Arcade in the coming weeks, months here as a kind of full game. And because it really is Monster Hunter Pokemon like, that it's turn-based battles, there's a weapons triangle aspect of speed, power, finesse. I'm trying to remember the correct ones there, but that red, green, blue aspect of a triangle in terms of weak and strong attacks. And because it kind of plays out in a turn-based piece, it doesn't need a whole lot of power. But the place where it slows down on the Switch version is because it isn't an open world. You get a little bit of slowdown in like big town areas, but also in some of the cutscenes. It starts to drop frames and stutter a little bit as well. And potentially that's because it was also simultaneously released on PC, but after doing a little bit of digging around for it, there's also some frame rate stutters on PC. So whether it's just not optimized well across the board, or if this is something that they'll be patching, they did come out, after they've sold 1 million of these so far, and they've come out and said that there's a number of critical issues that they're taking a look at and will issue a patch for. But in that announcement, there's nothing there about frame rates. So this is one where I don't know that it would require a more powerful system, but the way that it's been developed, it does suffer because of it being on it just hasn't been optimized on Switch, but is enjoyable. I mean, it's fun. It is one of those, like, played through where the demo takes you. The demo is out there. It's free. You'll see some of the slowdown in the demo, but it's a really good kind of it's the intro of the game. And if it's something you enjoy, it's one of those. It's felt the same way about the Switch or the 3DS version. Like, it was a game I enjoyed the demo of. It kind of waited around for a sale that never really came, but come the holiday season, if this is on a $30 rack during a sale, it's certainly, there's a lot of meat there for somebody who is interested in the Monster Hunter world without necessarily it's a different type of grind because it's a monster collecting rather than kind of monster dissecting aspect of Monster Hunter.
Yeah, I was curious, like, if that was why you. I mean, I know it's kind of a different take on the for the intellectual property. So, if that was what attracted you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've dabbled in Monster Hunter mainline series, but it never really hooks me. But I think the the anime aspect of this, the kind of cartoony aspect of it, and the turn-based combat gives it a much, it's a great kind of sit on your couch in handheld or before bed type of knock out a few battles, grind your way around type of RPG.
Cool. DB, why don't you stay on, and we got more sports talk.
We do have a lot more sports talk. Not a lot more, but more than we usually do. So, NBA Finals, it being from the Midwest, cheering on the Milwaukee Bucks. I did dive back into NBA 2K 21 and playing it on the new Xbox Series X. And the career mode there is a whole lot more expanded upon, is more complete than what was released in the last gen version. It has, you can play you can play a G League, in the one that was released for previous generation consoles. You went to college and you had one season in college and then went into the draft. Here you can choose to stay for 4 years in college and play and continue to kind of upgrade your character, or you can go to the G League, and there's some really fun stuff there for NBA 2K, kind of the my career people that have been playing over the years. You get a number of characters from the different story modes over the last generation, kind of all the way back to 14. They make an appearance. You play with some of them. You play against some of them. It makes for a kind of fun callback to the series, and it's a fun way to kind of play around in the G League with teams that you don't necessarily normally get to play with. And then it goes into the draft, which it plays out the same way. It's very contrived as it was before, but unlike the last gen version of it, where once you get into the league, the only story that happens is all just text. You get kind of texts on your phone or messages that kind of go through. Here, there are more cutscenes, which they've had in past. And in some ways, it's just a product of 2K trying to hit a deadline to get it out in September versus the next gen version, which came out in November, I believe, is when it came out around launch of the new consoles. So there's a little more time to add some of the rest of the content in. It also does some things with kind of the multiplayer aspects of playing against others. They've had a neighborhood for a while. Now it's a city. I've actually played a couple online games, and I found it more enjoyable than I expected if you're a team player. So you definitely need to pass the ball around and not just ball hog in order to beat some teams. But again, I'm loving it, buttery smooth, and the fact that they're starting to announce some of the differences between 2K22 and for the next gen and previous gens. It seems like they're moving in that not quite the same way where EA calls it a legacy, the legacy game where they didn't really add anything, but you're going to be getting a whole lot more depth for the my career, the WNBA aspects on the next gen versions of that game. So I know that I'll be playing with it, and I'll kind of keeping an eye on the next iteration of this as well.
All right. I alluded to this earlier, but that F1 2021 was not the only racing game that Game Logic played this fortnight. He also picked up Need for Speed, the remastered version of Hot Pursuit.
Yeah, so help me out, Swiss. Is it somebody else has played this before? Was that you?
That was us. Yeah,
Okay.
but way back on the PS3.
No. I mean, I well remember our playing the original on Saturday mornings at 5 o'clock
The
in the morning.
remaster.
But I thought since this thing dropped, somebody on the show had mentioned that they were.
I think
playing.
Tao might have.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe Tao.
Okay. So yeah, I grabbed it. It's on part of EA Play for Game Pass. So I grabbed it and pulled this down. It's a fun, nostalgic romp through, grassy highways that you came to know before. There are some things that are improved. I think one of the biggest things is just with all the motion blur and everything in it before, and how the PlayStation 3 hardware just really couldn't keep up with this game. When you and I would play Swiss, what I definitively remember was I was always one to take shortcuts, but I definitely remember part of the balancing act I was always having to do was acknowledging that, hey, when I go into shortcuts and drop into that, down onto the beach or into that canyon, I can't see. Like, the brown backdrop just blended into this moire of a blur that I was often like looking at the mini map to predict where I was supposed to turn because like just looking at it, I was like, I can't see what the heck is going on in that picture. And so that's been cleared up, and it's much more pleasant. I'm playing it on a 27-inch 1440p monitor with HDR. And so the visual clarity is just miles ahead of what it was. And granted, when we played, I played on I think I was on a 52-inch plasma and sitting, 12, 15 feet back from the TV. So definitely more enjoyable from that perspective. The game is what it's always been. It's a love affair with cars. They had all those voice acted voiceover intros for all the cars, and when I'm playing single player, I just sit there and listen to like the past history of some of the models and stuff. It's so great. You get multiple colors to apply to each car as you pick it, so each time you go out, you can tweak your look a little bit. And so all those things are kind of back in place. It is only a marginal graphical upgrade, I would say. And my gut feeling is that it benefits way more from an application of HDR than it appears the developers really like. I don't think they created any new assets. I don't know how much of an addition the texture pack is, but it's not a it's not a years beyond upgrade that maybe it could have been, but I also think that's fine. It was always as much as we say this, I think it's only really violently true in a few occasions. It's truly about the gameplay, and just that thrilling feeling of, even in single player, being on the track with a bunch of other sports cars who are all trying to win a race, and then all of a sudden pop in that cop speed trap, and seeing the lights go up, and you're like, oh man. Reminding yourself then that you don't have to outrun the cop, you just have to outrun that guy. So it's really an enjoyable experience. So that's one that I didn't expect to come right. Would have been in their pipeline, so it was really pleasant to hear it advertised. Another thing I will say about EA and this whole franchise, I think we've talked on this show about how I used to play all of these games. My history with the Need for Speed series goes all the way back to Need for Speed 2 High Stakes, I think, on the PC. But in the last few years, they've definitely been in a position where like I have little to no interest in playing a Need for Speed game. I would say, like, even though this game hasn't reviewed super highly, it's like the high 70s kind of game. But I would say, hey, EA, full-on authorization to go back and remake some of the most important like elements of this franchise, which, quite frankly, across those years is kind of all of them. Full-on authorization to go remake all of those games and re-release them. I would much rather get... This is a one instance where I would much rather get a remake of an EA Need for Speed game that I was really in love with, in my younger years, and I'm totally fine with them cranking that out, and I have little to no interest in them continuing to try and figure out the formula of how to make the next Need for Speed good. Maybe they're just tapped out and we should just get some remakes.
That's what was interesting about the contrast, because I feel like the later Need for Speed games, like many genres in this era of gaming, have that narrative RPG-esque like stuff kind of piled in to make it more of an experience. And I understand the aspect with the F1 where you're looking at it from a perspective of I'm a team owner, and it's more than just it's about the franchise. Like, I get that. Like, I get franchise mode to a certain extent. But like whatever they called it, breaking point, like that whole aspect of like let's have a drama series tied into our racing game. I feel like Need for Speed pulling those elements in has been like I have not been interested in the franchise since I've seen that. So
Help me on
you
the
playing
lineage
kind of
here, though. This is a Criterion one? This is not a
This
right.
is this?
no,
Yes, this is Criterion's first one.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and somebody can double check. I'll double check it. This is, if memory serves and I have it correct, this is Criterion's first one. It was amazing. It was before they got repurposed to Battlefront to do the X-wing combat, space vehicle combat with that.
Well, they stuck around. I mean, Criterion also did Most Wanted
They
as
did
well.
Most Wanted, and I have not. I was, but where they swung back to, in my opinion, in Need for Speed, this version of Hot Pursuit, they were really trying to recapture the historic legacy of the Need for Speed series, and they were really trying to do their best job to re-realize that vision. Most Wanted is a Burnout game. It's Burnout Paradise 2, and it plays that way and looks that way visually, and it is not pleasant, in my opinion, for that reason. Um, and then it's been all downhill, right? Since, I mean, Most Wanted initially came out good, but I mean, I just the more and more I got into that game, the less and less impressed I was. I actually had fun with what came. Um, Gosh, it had a car with purple trim on the front. The last one that I really liked was Rivals on the PlayStation 4. And it wasn't a great game, but I really loved the real time. It was an open world racing game that has had a storied problematic history, but I loved being a cop in that game and being in pursuit and being able to hit a button and call for help, and other players, real human players, would show up in the middle of a pursuit to help, and that was pretty amazing. I'll have to backtrack. There was one on the PlayStation. There was one other one on the PlayStation 3, which wasn't horrible, but it had some nuances in its gameplay and how you had to level up because you could top out in that game and not be able to complete it. But everything before that I think was kind of great, and lots of things after this were. I mean, this was the pinnacle. I mean, I liked some those other two iterations, but they were not. This, I mean, was as good as it gets, in my opinion.
Right. DV, we're gonna change gears pretty harshly right now. You picked up Cris Tales on the Xbox, so we're going from old school racing to
Old school
JRPG
RPG.
indie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a very old school type of. It's in that Mario RPG aspect of, you've got button presses. I really enjoyed Paper Mario. I enjoyed Bug Fables from last year. Cris Tales is in that same. Iconfall is in there as well, where you've got the timing to defend or the button to attack. But the difference here is that it plays a little bit with some time mechanics where you can go back in time or forward in time. I haven't played too much. I've only played kind of up through where the demo took me last year. It kind of takes us back through that same piece, but it introduces some of those concepts of, as you're out in the world talking with NPCs, that sometimes you're going to have to go back in time to figure out a puzzle or send things forward in time. Same thing with a boss battle. The demo has you doing throwing water on a boss battle and then speeding up time, which then helps the shield rust so you can make an attack. You do get a couple extra characters that it's not just a single. You're in a party, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And what were you going to say, Swiss?
I was gonna say, does that time travel or time change aspect, does it feel super gimmicky? Like the idea was cooler than the implementation? Because that's the impression that I'm getting when I read about it. Like, hey, that could be fun, and then I'm like, maybe it's just gonna be kind of.
I think what I haven't felt yet is that in a battle, it's one of many strategies you can apply, right? Like if it is the equivalent of, oh, I need to do a special attack in order to damage this boss, and that special attack happens to be backwards or forward in time, it's not nearly as inventive as it's one of the multiple strategies I could take to defeat somebody or to solve a puzzle, right? So at this point, and again, it's early in, that anytime that I've used time travel, it has felt kind of contrived in order to kind of demonstrate what it can do. I'll be curious to see if it becomes something that is one of many tools or if it just is, it's the equivalent of a special attack. But it's got a great art style. It's a Colombian indie developer. It leans into some Colombian folklore with the frog that accompanies you. Again, great art style, really nice, approachable RPG, kind of all ages. Loved it when I played it last fall. Was looking forward to it, and surprised that it came out on Game Pass. So it's a easy pickup there to play around and experiment with.
Cool. This will be quick, but I've been continuing playing Judgement on PS4, which is like the Yakuza spinoff, where you're kind of a ex-lawyer becomes a private eye type guy with Yakuza tie, like you kind of have ties in the Yakuza culture, so you're in like a bad part of Tokyo and everything. So it's my initial reactions were like I think I mentioned like the combat was kind of just clunky beat 'em up. And as I played more with the game, I've gotten more of a handle on how the developers kind of see the gaming experience for it. And it's not like a open world Ubisoft just exploring and then I have like you're hitting story points and there's a lot of cutscenes. They're never that long, but the story is moved along via cutscene. You have some options to like when you're doing investigations, it's kind of like little mini games that kind of just allow you to kind of feel engaged while you're going along. But it's still very much a story-driven game. But that's fine because the story is really cool. Like I am really liking this whole there's been murders in this bad part of town where like these Yakuza gangsters have been found with their eyes gouged out. And it's like so it's kind of like these gruesome murders and like it's kind of start out investigating one and it's spinning out and it's just really neat. The characters are very well done. The voice acting is good. And then there's like you have to go to the next point to kick off the next story element, but you can do wandering around and they have little things where you can meet some of the people in like the neighborhood that you're in. So like I've been meeting like the girl that runs the Smile Burger, and then there's like some random guy that's like looking for cats that he blogs about. So like he's like, I can't find the cat. Can you go take a picture of it? So like just and and then there's other cases where like this woman suspects her husband of cheating on her. So you have to tail the guy and capture the snapshot when he goes into the hotel with his paramour. So it's just like it's got this weird gamut of and a weird sense of humor, but then also very like serious elements. So it's been fun. But I think I said it the other time. It's definitely rated R. Although I have my teenager has been staying up with me to watch it, and like because it's this narrative focused game, she's really getting into it too, and she doesn't have to be holding the controller to be enjoying it to get like we can and like I'll be like, hey, when we're presenting evidence to somebody, I'm like, do you remember what this was? And they're like, oh yeah, we found this over there. And so like we can almost play together to a certain extent. So that's been kind of neat. But like she's definitely the only one I'm allowing to actually see this game because of the content. But I think I told Game Logic on the last deep dive, like when we were talking about like new consoles, like I'm timing my PS5 purchase for the sequel to Judgment that's probably you expect me to get it in September when Lost Judgment comes out, because that's how much fun I've been having. I mean, they have like one of the side things you can do to waste time is flying drone races, because there are elements in the game where you use a drone to kind of spy on somebody, or you can enter the drone league and race it through the city or the Kamurocho neighborhood. So it's been good. It was a surprise because I just picked it up on a whim, but I'm really happy with it. I think we'll wrap up. We got three little games, but they're like E2KG staples. So real fast game logic. What have you been doing in Black Ops?
So I'm actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and collapse my two just to go ahead and knock them out because it's really the same story. I mean, yeah, there's not a ton to talk about in terms of gameplay with these two. I'm continuing to play Black Ops Cold War on a bunch of platforms. I'm playing on Xbox this week, and I'm playing Destiny 2 on PC, specifically on my gaming laptop. One of the things that happened with the whole Stream Deck thing and not all of the conversations I was involved with about the Stream Deck were, I would say, pleasant experiences on Twitter. But as I kind of recoiled and backed out of this thing, because that conversation to me was always about I think Valve's done a great thing. I don't care about I've decided the hardware's not for me, but people are free to make their choice. But it's really just been about, hey, I just want to make sure potential customers are aware of the thing. But anyway, what it caused me to introspect about the navel gazing sometimes that DBQ talks about is I was like, I need to, there's hardware things that I really need to, as HP used to say, make personal again. Some things that I really need to find some more closeness to and relevance about. And that's kind of been my focus, and part of the interference with that is my OCD about stacking and projecting my gaming playlist out for the next 2 weeks and always wanting that. I mean, on the approach path to this show, I re-racked and stacked my playlist probably about 19 times and concurrently updated the E2KG agenda just as many times, right? And a lot of this, as I was starting to back away from Twitter, was also I was starting to back away from a lot of that and a lot of the problems that causes. And so my existence right now today is I'm trying to simulate that I only own my Xbox and my gaming laptop, and I only play Call of Duty and Destiny 2. And the only thing I know about my playlist right now is I'm playing Destiny 2 when I get off the phone with you guys tonight, and I'm playing Destiny 2 again tomorrow. And that's as far out as I'm allowing myself to kind of script. The two experiences with those, going back to hardware, I'm playing Black Ops with my Thrustmaster eSwap X Pro, the custom Thrustmaster controller for Xbox. One of the neatest things I'm forcing myself to do, just by a calamity of errors, is I thought I had the underbelly buttons zeroed out and no functions mapped to them. And I had this problem because I've been playing on keyboard and mouse on Call of Duty for the last month or so. I was like, this is going to suck. It's going to be horrible going back to controller. And I had this problem with every time I hit sprint, it seemed that it was scoping in, and then my sprint would stop, and then I couldn't get my sprint going in. Well, somehow I had the scope in thing mapped to a underbelly button, and I couldn't figure out how to get it off. And I was live streaming. I was like, I don't want to go out to the Thrustmaster app and read it. So I basically spent half of that gaming session forcing myself to play with the underbelly button, which is a muscle memory motor skill that I just haven't been able to force myself to do. That necessity has been wonderfully freeing, and I'm like, I think this actually makes me play better. So I'm super interested now in further exercising that and doing the same thing with my Elite Force controller and using that, because I've known for a while that underbelly button would be less of a repetitive motor impact and on my wrists and stuff, which I have some problems with. But I just haven't been able to force myself through that to learn that motor skill. But I started forcing myself that night, and I was like, this is amazing. So that'll be a thing. And then Destiny 2 on hardware, one of the impact it's had is I'm playing on a 2560 by 1080p widescreen, ultra widescreen monitor. which I don't have a lot of because those things cause a problem with live streaming, but I have that on my gaming laptop. I've struggled to get my ROI out of that, and I keep, I haven't used it as much as I should. I've been using it, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, Destiny 2 looks amazing in ultra widescreen format. Like, to just have that game and like the whole width of view stretched out across that display is just, I mean, just wonderful. And the game still, in my opinion, still looks great. 4 years after it launched, you know, runs perfectly. So it's caused me to really enjoy playing in that format, which again, like I said, I don't get to do a lot because of live streaming. But it's convinced me that I love that. I'm going to keep doing more of it. I'm going to put the notion of an ultra widescreen monitor back on my recap list, like probably next year, and look for a 3K, 4K ish monitor. Definitely a 2560 by 1440p ultra widescreen monitor. So that's been good.
Awesome. All right, so my staple is Civilization 6. Here's the update on the mega cloud play games that I was part of. I was doing well, starting to assert myself in one of the places, and I think I was probably pretty quick to advance some of my stuff, get to like the armor, like the Iron Age where I could start building swordsmen and everything. And the cloud play stopped functioning for me. So I went to click my next turn that day, and it just started playing like a normal game. And then I tried it on my other computer, and it did the same thing. And I installed and uninstalled and reinstalled Civ 6, and it did the same thing. So I had to drop out of that game, and then everybody re-entered. Like we created a new room with the game save. Everybody re-entered. I tried to take my next turn, still did the same thing. My alternative game, so I was doing this in 2 different games, same thing happened. So like I basically had to drop out of both those games so everybody could continue playing. Otherwise, it was like perpetually stuck on mine.
But it worked
It
for
was
the other people, just not for
it
you.
was working for the other people. So it was like something got corrupted. I don't know why they decided they hated me. 2K, like I signed up for your 2K whatever thing too, and it still didn't work. But it's glitchy. There's some glitches there where you can't trust, or if you are doing cloud play, you I don't know, it might not work. So
Did you say this was a gaming laptop you were playing on, or just a regular?
I played it on my main gaming PC and my work laptop that has like the Intel Z new graphics
Oh
card.
yeah.
Like, I mean, it'll work. It's not like great, but for Civ 6, it's fine. And it didn't matter which device I tried it on. It just would not like commit my turns to the cloud anymore. And I haven't done anything special. I didn't install any mods or anything like that. So I've just been letting Steam update it when Steam wanted to update it. So whatever happened, there's like some glitch where some people can just become cloud player non grata. I don't know.
This is a stretch, but maybe because so Microsoft, I had a similar problem with Microsoft Flight Simulator until this new one just came out, where my Steam version would save flight plans in mid-flight, but but if I stopped it, right, if I did a mid-flight save and stopped it, like it could never reload it, and I never knew. But there was a way to do an export, so I could have the file. And I just wonder if wouldn't be surprised if Civ 6 would have some export save function. And I wonder, could you export it and upload it
Well,
manually?
that was the first thing we tried.
Okay,
So
sorry.
we I s- ex we saved the game. So I imported that as a new cloud game. Everybody joined, didn't work. I dropped out. Another player saved the game, so it moved past my turn. Another player saved the game, recreated it. I was able to join back in when it came back around to my turn after the computer took my turn and did some stupid stuff. And then when I tried to save it again, it did the same thing. So I have no idea. We tried a few different things, but after like 3 months, it's kind of disappointing that that's how it ended for me. But that's the update. So, all right. Next Pix plays in 2 weeks. So we're going to explore the world, game where one of the characters is the map. Not just a topic for open world games, but look for games divided into distinct regions where when you are on one section of the map, you are essentially on an isolated island and not as exposed to events that could be going on elsewhere. Or at least we're determining your way in the world requires actually using the map and understanding a sense of direction and managing time to transit, not just getting your assignment from an NPC and following an on-map pointer. So, Game Logic you're the one that drafted this one, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What was the inspiration?
I don't remember. It was something that I was thinking that I was going to get into playing or something, but it was. I think it was actually an article that I was reading, maybe on Destructoid or Rock Paper Shotgun, one of those two, where there was a conversation on kind of some map game design theory, and man, and I think some of the conversations we've had and some of the other conversations I've been having with other gamers just talked about um, that map functionality and design in a game where it was. I think this is so. I think what I've been thinking, not to say anybody could. I mean, one of the beauties of these things is that each of us interprets it a different way. But I think what I've been thinking is this is in particular when the map is something that's not an Ubisoft open world map, right? In the Tchotchke Palooza, like spread all over the map to the point of
That's
distraction.
That's what I was thinking when I was like, previewed it and it's like, in other words, not Ubisoft.
But wait, I'm gonna be an Ubisoft defender.
Yeah, no,
here,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
You could when I thought of this, I thought of the exploration modes in the last 2 Assassin's Creed, where you can turn off the map wayfinders and you have to figure out, like, they tell you it's over the hill in the east of the map, and you kind of have to figure that out by navigation, not by waypoint.
And I think that's definitely a thing. I mean, I wouldn't discount the last, not last, I wouldn't discount the Division 2 because there's a whole, like, there's a thought process to locking down sectors and revisiting sectors and leveling and incorporating that map exploration, even as from an objective conquer the world type of perspective. I wouldn't discount. There was a game that just leapt to mind. The game I would discount as a for instance, even though I would love to pick it myself. Like, but definitely it's a hard skew away from a Destiny 2, which is like you go to an NPC, you get the next go fetch thing. Not to say that I dislike it, but you get a cutscene, you get a go fetch thing, you show up somewhere, and you get a pointer, right? And you just go there. I mean, actually, I couldn't discount somebody. If somebody wanted to make that choice, I could see them making the argument that, like, yeah, but I did lost sectors, right? Because that is, you're doing some orienteering there and trying to figure out where's what, and you're off the map because you're in areas that aren't really charted out. So yeah, have fun.
I was thinking that this is a nice segue into Flight Simulator launching on Series X and S next week as well.
Absolutely, because I had that talk a few weeks ago where I said I spent most of my time doing flight planning, trying to figure out my trip.
All right. Well, that'll be in 2 weeks. So we have a lot. It was just usually like these come about when somebody's on a soapbox about either a news item or a game that was released, and I was curious what was the inspiration for that. Yeah, we got a nice different Pix Plays assignment. So next week will be our deep dive when we talk about news. Tao will return to host, and I will join him. It'll be another 2-member affair. And as Game Logic and DB have the week off to navigate through virtual environments, I'm assuming. So that will be it for tonight's episode 202 of the Enough to Keep Going network. Thank you for joining us. Keep enjoying your games, and join us on Discord. interact with us on Twitter and be a part of the community. So thank you.